Debunking the myth of the pagan origins of Christmas.
Mr. Reagan.
Recently, I got into a debate on Twitter about the myth of the pagan origins of Christmas. And I thought, what a great subject to talk about right before Christmas. And when I was a kid, there was no debate about the origins of Christmas. Christmas was a celebration of the birth of Christ, and everything about Christmas originated with that in mind. That's what we all knew, that's what we all understood. Christmas was a pure expression of gratitude to God. It was purely a Christian holiday. Well, as the years went by, it became in vogue to challenge long-held beliefs, but especially targeted were Christian beliefs. One of the casualties of this trend was Christmas traditions. Now, there are three major claims that I've heard made about Christmas traditions being pagan. 1. December 25th was a date stolen from an old Roman holiday in order to more easily convert Romans to Christianity. 2. Christmas trees were originally a pagan tradition because pre-Christian Europeans decorated their home with evergreens in the winter in ancient times, perhaps even for pagan religious reasons. And 3, Santa Claus was originally the Norse god Odin. Now let's disprove this nonsense one at a time. I begin in one moment. First, I have to sell you something. Right now, stocks are at an all-time high. The economy is roaring. Houses are selling and weak interest rates are at zero. And the government just printed $5 trillion. What could possibly go wrong? Meanwhile, consumer confidence has hit a 10-year low, and inflation hit 6.8%, with parts of the U.S. seeing rates as high as 8%. Something is not adding up. So what can you do? You can play it safe. Putting some of your assets into precious metals will keep your money away from the volatility of the markets and will protect you from inflation. Investing in precious metals will let you sleep at night. This month, Noble Gold is giving away a free America the Beautiful solid silver 5-ounce coin with any qualifying plan that you start. So talk to an expert at Noble Gold and they'll run you through your options to keep your money safe. No pressure, no hassling, no call centers, just a chance to speak to somebody who knows what they're talking about. And how refreshing would that be? Start by calling 877-646-5347 or visit their website at noblegoldinvestments.com. Proponents of the pagan origins of Christmas myth argue that early Christians didn't actually know the date of Christ's birth, and so the date of a pagan Roman holiday was chosen as it was already a festive day. Now, it is true that we don't know the exact date of Christ's birth, but the December 25th date was chosen after a genuine effort to approximate the date of Christ's birth. It wasn't an attempt to co-opt a pagan festival day. Now, the reason people think that it was a co-opt of a Roman festival day is because the Romans did have a holiday on December 25th. The Romans celebrated the winter solstice with a week-long festival called Saturnalia. This festival ended on December 25th, a day they called Sol Invictus. So the theory is that Christians co-opted this date in order to make the conversion to Christianity more palatable to pagan Romans accustomed to celebrating on this day. But this isn't true at all. Jesus was genuinely believed to have been conceived on March 25th. Because Jesus is believed to have been conceived on March 25th, his birth is celebrated on December 25th, 9 months later. Now, this has nothing to do with Sol Invictus or Saturnalia or anything else Roman. You know, it's funny, I actually called my cousin whilst I was writing this script, and she said, actually, I think women tend to be pregnant for 10 months before the birth, and I basically just said, well, I think it was men who calculated this date, so we don't really know about that kind of thing. Despite what the left may tell you today, men don't have babies. Now, let me go further with this whole idea that taking the day from the Roman holiday is absurd by saying this. Until the 4th century, Christians were mercilessly persecuted by the Romans. It was not a religious culture that they wanted to be associated with. That would be like Jews today picking a holy day based on a day that was important to the Nazis. That's insane. That would never happen. And yet, that is essentially what these armchair historians are trying to get you to believe. It doesn't make any sense. I should also note that when early Christians established the December 25th date for Christmas, there were about 59 festival days on the Roman calendar. So overlapping holidays between Christianity and Roman paganism was actually not that unlikely. All right, let's move on to number 2. the myth about the origin of Christmas trees. This is even more preposterous. Now, there is actually zero evidence to suggest that there is any connection between Christmas trees and paganism. The only thing that I could find to support this absurd theory is a belief that ancient people in pagan Europe used to use branches of evergreen trees to decorate their homes in winter. But there's a couple of problems when trying to draw a connection between that practice and the tradition of the Christmas tree. First of all, the first record of a Christmas tree was in the 16th century. This is almost 1,000 years after Germany was Christianized. This first recorded Christmas tree was put up by Protestant Germans in Alsace, France. And this is, incidentally, very near the region where many of my ancestors are from. And to me, that's pretty cool. But one reason why I think this myth may be convincing to people is that ancient German pagans did hold some trees as sacred. From what I understand, these were always oak trees, but nevertheless, holding trees sacred makes the pagan Christmas tree link a lot more compelling. But the truth is, this has absolutely nothing to do with the Christian tradition. Now, another problem with the pagan origin of the Christmas tree theory is that, of course, ancient Germans decorated their homes with evergreen branches in winter. That was the only foliage available. You can't exactly pick flowers and decorate your home in the middle of winter in Germany. So if you want to decorate with some foliage from the outside, all you've really got to choose from are like the barren branches of oak trees and evergreen branches. So please, feel free to enjoy the magnificence of your Christmas tree, safe in the knowledge that this is truly a purely Christian Christmas tradition. Now, probably the most annoying pagan origins of Christmas myth to me is the myth that Santa Claus was drawn from the ancient Norse god Odin. It's annoying to me because people really believe this one. I mean, everybody knows that Santa Claus is primarily drawn from Saint Nicholas of Myra, the 3rd century Greek bishop who would secretly give gifts to people in need. Nicholas became the patron saint of the Netherlands, and the Dutch actually have Sinterklaas Day on December 6th, and that's the day that they exchange presents. This was eventually merged with Christmas by Protestants who didn't want to celebrate holy days dedicated to Catholic saints. But traditionally in the Netherlands, on Sinterklaas Day, children leave their boots by the chimney or near the front door, and they fill them with carrots or hay for Sinterklaas's horse. And in exchange for the carrots and the hay, Sinterklaas leaves gifts for the children. And so we see here how this Santa Claus character was derived from Sinterklaas, who was in turn derived from St. Nicholas. However, a lot of people maintain that many of the magical elements of Santa are drawn from Odin and the Norse tradition of the Wild Hunt, specifically the Swedish version of those stories. But the Wild Hunt really bears no resemblance to Santa Claus, other than Odin rides a flying horse, which some maintain is kind of like Santa being pulled by a flying sleigh drawn by reindeer. But Odin also had hunting dogs and many other men hunting with him, and he certainly doesn't go around leaving presents for children. It's a hunt. There is a huge variety of wild hunt stories from ancient Europe. These were collected and studied by Jacob Grimm. Many of the versions of this story involve cursed souls forced to hunt for eternity, werewolves, demons, and a bunch of other weird stuff. It actually doesn't seem all that much like Santa Claus at all, but modern pagans, atheists, and other anti-Christian cynics desperately hold on to this wild hunt Santa Claus idea. The truth is that many of the more magical elements of Santa Claus were invented by American writers. The flying sleigh was invented by Washington Irving in 1812. The idea that it was reindeer drawing the sleigh was invented by an unknown American poet in 1821. These and many other Santa elements were finally presented all together by Clement Clarke Moore in 1823 in his famous poem, The Night Before Christmas. Finally, I want to quickly address another minor Christmas tradition that my family never practiced, the burning of the Yule log. I want to talk a little bit about this one because, though I don't know anyone who burns a Yule log, I think it's a good example of how a tradition can easily be misattributed with an unrelated ancient origin. Now, if you're unaware of the tradition of the Yule log, it's basically just burning a big log in your fireplace. That's it. The Yule log tradition began in England in the 17th century. Later, some historians guessed that maybe it was a tradition drawn from ancient paganism. But these guesses were not derived from any evidence. Rather, they were pure speculation. Yule log sounds a lot like an ancient pagan thing. Yule, after all, is derived from the ancient Germanic term for the season we now think of as Christmas time. Medieval Christians in England, they didn't actually associate the word Yule with paganism. It was just a time of the year. So the term Yule log, being coined in the strongly religious 17th century, would have been like calling it a winter log today. After about 100 years, traditions start to seem as though they've been around forever, especially if they have an ancient-sounding name. So it's natural, I think, that a historian might speculate about an ancient-sounding practice actually originating in ancient times. Now, I'm not sure how important the Yule log tradition ever was, but I don't believe burning a big log in winter was ever critical to anyone's religious views. I think it probably had a lot more to do with the practical concerns of warmth and light. But people can very easily be convinced that a tradition is older than it really is. A great example of this is the Kentucky Fried Chicken tradition in Japan. Japan is a mostly Shinto and Buddhist nation. Only about 1% of Japanese citizens are Christian. And yet the Japanese enthusiastically celebrate Christmas each year. But what's truly bizarre about Christmas in Japan is that Christmas dinner is traditionally Kentucky Fried Chicken. For real. That is a major Christmas tradition in Japan.
3.6 million families eat KFC during the Christmas season. It's a national tradition. Today, Japan is the third largest market for KFC with 1,165 outlets as of December 2014.
クリスマス予約しなきゃパーティーバーレル早割予約13日までクリスマスケンタッキーにしない
And if you tell a Japanese person that Americans don't eat KFC on Christmas, you'll find that they're shocked. They all think that that's what we do on Christmas. You see, many years ago, the head of KFC in Japan started this association between fried chicken and Christmas. This was obviously a marketing thing. But then later in an interview, he was asked if Kentucky Fried Chicken was the traditional Christmas dinner in the U.S., and he just said, yeah, sure is. He just straight up lied. And that simple lie convinced an entire nation that Americans all eat KFC every Christmas. And Japanese people still think this to this day. So, marketing can be very powerful. Marketing, however, is not the reason for Christmas being on the 25th of December, and it's also not the reason for our red-suited Santa. This is a popular myth, and a lot of people believe this. Even I was totally convinced of this. The cynics have long maintained that our modern concept of Santa was developed by the Coca-Cola company in order to make a jolly association between Santa and Coca-Cola, and so the company demanded that Santa's suit be red, the same color as the Coke bottles. And these cynics maintain that before this ad campaign, Santa had been depicted in all kinds of colors, red, blue, green, etc., and that it was the Coke company that single-handedly gave us our red-suited Santa. But actually, this is not true. Though it is true that you can find Santa depicted in a variety of colors up until about 1900, Coca-Cola only started using Santa in ads in 1923, and by then, Santa's red suit was firmly established in the culture. This is from Pluck magazine, 1902. This is from a Canadian department store catalog, 1906. This is Boy's Life, 1913. Here's a Japanese illustration from 1914 showing that the look had even crossed the Pacific by then. I'm trying to see the KFC hidden somewhere in the picture. I'm sure it's there somewhere. This is a government poster from 1918, and here is Norman Rockwell's Santa from 1922. And here is Coca-Cola's first Santa finally appearing in 1923. But this isn't even the Santa that's claimed to have created the legendary Santa image. That Santa wouldn't appear until 1931. And here he is, painted by the legendary artist Haddon Sundblom. This Santa is undoubtedly one of the most beautiful and charming depictions of Old St. Nick. But the cynical myth that Santa's red suit was nothing but a callous marketing strategy of a soulless corporation feeding their insatiable capitalist greed, well, that's just not true. So why has this myth been so successfully sold to the American people? Well, I think a couple of reasons. For one thing, people don't like to be lied to, so when they hear about being tricked, they don't want to be one of the suckers. They want to be one of those people who are on to the con. They want to be able to say, I'm not gullible, I don't fall for cheap advertising gimmicks. I'm too smart for that. I'm aware that Santa's suit was just a marketing ploy, and my knowledge of that means that I'm not subject to the intended manipulation of Coca-Cola. Ironically, the very opposite is true. By believing that Coca-Cola established the red suit means you have been manipulated by a bit of a con. The con of historical revisionism. But another reason why this myth has been so successful, I think, is a little more sinister. And I think it's a good analog to see what's going on with the pagan origins of Christmas myth. There is an impulse, I think, with some people. An impulse to smash things that are beautiful. These are, Antifa types, vandalizing property, burning buildings, and toppling statues. And what is more beautiful than Christmas? And there are people who are compelled to ruin even that. Consider my last video about Seth Rogen if you're unsure about the truth of that. And I think that this idea that Santa as we know him today is something of a fraud, I think that idea is really attractive to these cynical types. They love this kind of cultural destruction. And so too do they love any ideas about Christmas that might diminish the religious significance of the holiday. If Christmas is no longer perceived to be about love and gratitude and all that's good in the world, to these cultural vandals, that's a good thing. They want Christmas to be a trick of evil capitalists to get you to buy more stuff, or a marketing ploy by early Christians to con Romans into converting. And as time marches on, people ignorant of Christian history will always look at the overlap between Christmas and the pagan celebration of Sol Invictus and assert that Christmas is a pagan holiday. These cynics will look at Christmas trees and try to connect them to ancient pagan tree worship. These folks will always try to find some way to denigrate Christian traditions, reducing them to cheap adaptations of more ancient pagan practices. But this is all false. Christmas is, and always was, a celebration of the birth of Christ. It is a purely Christian holiday. And the truth is that, to most people around the world, Christmas is the happiest season of all. So instead of trying to ruin it, let's just enjoy it. After all, the Christmas season is what you make of it. Be nice, be happy. And to everyone watching this video, wherever you are in the world, Christian, Jew, Muslim, atheist, Hindu, or Buddhist, Merry Christmas.
Christmas means so much because of one special child. But Christmas also reminds us that all children are special, that they are gifts from God. In their love and laughter, in our hopes for their future, lies the true meaning of Christmas. As Charles Dickens, whom I quoted a few moments ago, said so well, God bless us